EAGLES, Eagles.
Monday, April 22nd. It's draft week here in Philadelphia. The Eagles have the 22nd pick, and John McMullen will tell us what they're going to do with that 22nd pick as we kick off draft week. Coming up today, 8:20, Jeff Kerr, and 9:20, Rick Saratella will begin our draft week coverage this week, and a couple of other updates on our draft stuff we'll have either later today or first thing tomorrow. You'll see some new activity here on the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. Johnny, good morning. Draft week, ready to go. How you doing?
Finally here. Gotta breathe out a sigh of relief. The paralysis by over-analysis. There's too much time, Krause.
Well, the mock draft, we're now, or many people are now on mock draft 10-0 or mock draft 15. A lot of chatter, a lot of conversation leading up to what will take place on Thursday. The first question, John, do the Eagles need to do anything other than sit at 22? And the reason I asked that question is looking at some of the quarterbacks that are going to be selected early, some of the offensive skill position talent that's going to be taken early. Will the Eagles find themselves in a position, if they do nothing, that they'll have their opportunity or their choice to get either an offensive lineman or a cornerback, if that's the way they're going?
Yes and no. From the perspective of most of the people who do mock drafts, remember they're talking in a more general sense about every team in the NFL. So you're talking about 32 teams who each have different boards and different wants and different systems and different coaches and different needs. So they're the mindset of one particular NFL team, and obviously we're talking about the Eagles here, is far more targeted than, the big board you're going to see, whatever your favorite draft site is going to be. So talking to Mark Dominic last week, the former GM in Tampa Bay, and he had mentioned the number is 23 legitimate first round picks from his perspective. And, Mark had been in personnel department for 20 years, so he knows his stuff. But and that's, and when I say legitimate first round grades, that's, maybe if you're at 25 and you don't like somebody, maybe that's time to think about trading down. And because you have that levels of the draft and there's a little bit of fall off, and then maybe you can add something to a similar player if you go down. So from just the math standpoint, the Eagles should be in good shape, especially because quarterbacks always get pushed up the board. There's 4 legitimate quarterbacks that should be in the top 22. They don't have any interest in a quarterback, obviously. There could be even more than that go in the top 22, and that would be a good thing for the Eagles because quarterback desperate teams push good football players down the board. But that's not how the Eagles are going to look at it. They're focused on 2 or 3 or 4 players that they feel is a fit for them. And, Howie's recent history, whether you go back 4 of the past 5 years, going back to Andre Dillard, they traded up to get a player. Jordan Davis, DeVonta Smith, Jalen Carter, even last year, they had a small targeted trade up. And that's what I think the goal is going to be on Thursday night as well. I'm focused on 3 players, 2 of them from Alabama, Terrion Arnold, the cornerback, J.C. Latham, the offensive lineman. And the wild card is Latu from UCLA. And he's a wild card because he for those who don't know, he started his college career at Washington and had to medically retire for about 18 months because he had neck fusion surgery. So that's all about, I wish I could get apply on the office of Dr. Arsh Denoda, who's the Eagles chief medical officer, because if I think if he's cleared and if they feel comfortable with him, I think he's in the mix as well. But that's a big if, and that's nobody can know. That's one of those things, and Howie talked about this in his pre-draft stuff. If the medical people flag somebody, that's it. There's nothing you can do as a personnel guy, as a coach. You can't go in there and pound the table and say, I'm a medical expert. Take a shot. And that happened with DK Metcalf. A lot of fans get upset and kind of talk about DK Metcalf to this day. A lot of teams red flagged DK Metcalf. The Eagles were among them because he had a neck issue. And he's held up and he's worked out well, and it looks bad. But again, if the medical people flag a prospect, there's not much you can do about it. You got to trust them and you got to trust their expertise. So Latu is the wild card, but I would say, as always with the Eagles, they're going to focus on a couple players that they really want. And if one of them starts to slip, they're going to move to get them.
John, how do you think the Eagles are looking at themselves? And here's the reason why I asked that question. You go from within a half of winning the Super Bowl, you get out of the box in 2023 and win 10 games, 10 of your first 11 games, are dominating or are finding ways to come back and win that game, and then fall off the table, completely fall off. And the fall off leads to chaos, conversation, the A.J. Brown scenario, and then you come full circle, and now you find yourself on the doorstep of the draft, obviously. And I wonder how the Eagles are, or Howie Roseman is self-evaluating his pick or his priority for this pick. Is he, well, let me get you to answer that first. Where are they from a self-evaluation standpoint? Where are the Eagles right now in their mind, based on your opinion?
As far as being a contender, not a contender, as far as going after a particular player, well,
forget the player for a moment. Hey, this is where we are. We decided to keep Nick Sirianni. We talked to Bill Belichick. Any and all of that. They are who they are right now. They kept Nick Sirianni. They got new coordinators. Where do they feel they are when they assess going into the draft?
They clearly believe they are still a contender. I don't agree with what they did with the coaching staff, and I don't agree entering a season as sort of a lame duck coach. And by lame duck coach, I mean, if Nick Sirianni doesn't reach expectations this year, it's more than likely he's not going to be back next year. That seems to be obvious, or it seems to be the thought process around the league. And if it's obvious to people around the league, that means it's obvious to people in the locker room. And if things go poorly, then you have the human nature aspect of, well, this guy's not going to be around next year anyway. And that can head in a negative direction. That's why I never like sort of lame duck coaches or lame duck quarterbacks for that matter either. Never works for that reason. And he's not a literal lame duck, so people can argue in the other direction. But again, if you're being realistic, and Nakobe Dean, when he talked last week, he talked about being an optimistic, realistic person or something of that nature. And that's fine to be optimistic, but you got to be a realist as well. And look, everybody sees it. And so you're trying to sell something in an opposite direction that everybody sees. So I don't agree what they did with the coaching staff. Hopefully, from the prospect of getting Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, they will have better coordinators. But again, it's talent first. It's personnel first. It's always good times or bad times. And having a better coach than Sean Desai is not going to win you 3 more games if you have the same level of talent and the same level of play that you had last season from some of the guys you were counting on. So that part of it, I think, fans too often, they want to protect their favorite players. So they don't want to blame the players. And usually when things are going well, it's all the players. So they're great. Everybody's great. And when things are going poorly, it's blamed on the coaches. And it's usually players. It's fair to give the players credit when things are going well. It's not fair to make excuses for them when things are going poorly. And that's, and Big Fangio is a great coach. He's not a miracle worker. So, they have to play better. The players have to take responsibility. They have to take ownership of it. And hopefully they will. Hopefully, I've already predicted, I think they'll have a huge increase in defensive productivity just because Vic's around. I think he'll teach it better. I think they'll be better prepared. But at the end of the day, they have big holes at alt-ball linebacker. We have to see how the cornerback situation develops. We have to see how the safety situation develops. I mean, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, everybody remembers him here. He barely played last season in Detroit because of a torn pec. When he was out there, he didn't play well, and he lost his job. So assumption he's going to be the same guy. Is he going to be better than what the Eagles had? Sure. But there's what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of questions on the defensive side of the football. And we'll see how that shakes out. Offensively, it's a little bit different because Krause, Kellen Moore is just under extreme pressure, and the fact that everybody thinks this is the best offense in football before they take one snap in OTAs. And that's the standard, and that's the expectation. So if you're 8th again, number 8 in the NFL, that's where the Eagles were last season. They were number 3 in third down offense, number 1 in fourth down offense, number 9 in red zone offense. All that is really good. It's not good enough. It wasn't good enough last year. It's certainly not going to be good enough this year because people think they're better because of the addition of Saquon Barkley. And again, the focus is on skill position players. You also lost Jason Kelce. Probably more important of the two, but offensive line isn't as sexy as getting another skill position player. So Kellen Moore comes in with these enormous expectations. He might be a great coach. He might have the 6th ranked offense, which would be phenomenal.
Is that enough, John?
Not good. Hell no. Hell no. So that's what he's dealing with. A little bit different. And that, to be honest, that falls on the shoulders of Jalen Hurts. And, it's up to Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier to get him back on track. And they're a big part of it from the teaching and preparation standpoint. Hopefully they do a better job. But, Jalen Hurts has got to look like Jalen Hurts of 2022 rather than Jalen Hurts of 2023. So, and again, people want to blame that on Brian Johnson. He's the scapegoat. Some people blame it on Nick Sirianni. Whomever. Blame whoever you want. Bottom line is, guy's got to get back to where he was before.
Well, where was Jalen in the first 10 or 11 games last year compared to where he was finishing up when they fell off the table? Was it Jalen Hurts?
I think he was still playing at a very high level. Remember, if you looked at the betting odds when they were 10-1, he was the leader for the MVP race. Now that has to do with winning football games. Let's be honest. But was he playing as well as he was? No. But the difference, and I talked about it on the show at that time, the difference was the turnovers. That was the only real difference. was a little bit lack of explosion from in the running game, whether it was the knee injury. I do think he fell in love with the big play a little bit too much and was trying to push the football. When defenses made an adjustment, we're trying to take that away. I think he fell in love with that. But the big difference between 2022 and 2023 was the turnovers. And some of that is just random. Coaches hate that. And I don't, if you use the term luck, but it is. Sometimes the ball doesn't bounce your way. There's different. You have to look at every single turnover. The interception against the Jets, their lone loss in that 10-1 start. That's all Jalen Hurts. That's just a blatant mistake. The interception in Seattle, that's all Jalen Hurts. That's just a blatant mistake. On the other hand, if you have a jumbled snap at the mesh point, and that gets put on the quarterback's record, sometimes it's the running back's fault. So you have to look at each one individually. But first things first, take care of the football. And in his entire career, he's been tremendous with ball security. So similar to a couple years ago, Dak Prescott had a bad season when it came to turnovers. And I told everybody, don't get excited. It's probably going to go back to normal because that guy takes care of the football. And it went back to normal. I expect the same thing with Jalen Hurts, and that'll help immensely, by the way.
So based on that, John, if the Eagles do nothing and stay at 22, perhaps that's the answer. Maybe the Eagles don't need to do anything. But let's just assume for a moment they do nothing and they stay at 22, and there's an offensive lineman there that they like, one of the 2 or 3 offensive linemen that they've identified. There's a couple of the cornerbacks that are there, 2 or 3, 1 or 2 of them that they've identified as players that they like. Which way will they go if they stay put at 22?
Well, if any of those 3 names drop, and again, Latu, I put the asterisk on, and the fact of that's all medical. He's involved if he's cleared, and they'll take him in a second, I would think, at 22 if he falls that far. But you have to realize if the Eagles clear him medically, others are probably going to clear him medically. So I think it's going to be very difficult in that type of instance because it's a poor defensive draft, very offensive heavy draft at the top. The first defender is probably going to be Dallas Turner to go. Maybe 9, 10, 11, somewhere in that range. That's how long it's going to take a defensive player to go. And it might be one of the corners. It might be Terrion Arnold. The corners are sort of like, what flavor do you like? And I think the Eagles like Terrion Arnold best. Cooper DeJean a little bit. Would I take him at 22? Maybe, but I wouldn't go up to get him. I just don't think they're staying at 22. It's just not Howie's way. He's going to identify 3, 4 players. And if one of them starts to fall a little bit farther than the Eagles expected, I think he's going to go up and get him. He doesn't, remember, as a contender, he doesn't need volume. So I think a lot of people get caught up in volume. Oh, you need this pick, you need this pick. No, you don't. You need to get difference-making players who can maybe put you over the hump when you're trying to shoot for a Super Bowl. If you're a rebuilding team, yeah, you want bodies. You want players. You want to trade down, add picks. The Eagles aren't in that point. If you look at their roster, yeah, they need a running back. They'll take a running back on day 3. They would like to get a third wide receiver that's an upgrade over Paris Campbell. They might even want a backup tight end for Dallas Goedert. You could use some depth on the offensive line. Certainly right guard is where we're focused on in the first round. and then kicking out the right tackle. And that's where I think Latham is the fit. They could use another edge rusher. You can always use another edge rusher. Deep at defensive tackle. They need an off-ball linebacker, but that conversation doesn't start until day 2 or day 3, to be honest. Maybe day 2. And then secondary, obviously they need some talent there as well. But if you compare that against most teams, they need a hell of a lot more. So the Eagles don't need volume. They need difference makers. And they're going to identify, again, 3 or 4 players they think can be difference makers. And I think that's just Howie's way. He likes the trades. That's Howie. That's what he said.
Well, I think they need a difference maker at wide receiver number 3. And I know that that's a, unusual statement given the fact that they have so much money dumped in AJ Brown and now the re-up of Devontae Smith.
Only one football, Krause.
What's that?
Only one football.
Only one football, but you still need in the modern NFL, John, you need those assets and those weapons because they need to outscore everybody. They need
I think they
need to score a lot of points to win games.
I don't think that's going to be the case. Yeah, they're going to score a lot of points, number one. I don't think it's this, even if you go back last year, and we got to get to the break in Jeff Kerr, but even if you go back last year, they won in Tampa 25-11. They beat the Rams 23-14. The Dolphins was their most impressive game, 31-17. Remember, Miami had been coming off that 70-point game. They were the best offense in the NFL at that point. I think after things went off the wheels and they made the dumb switch to Matt Patricia, people have sort of conflated that into consistently bad all the time. They were terrible against San Francisco, who's the best offense in the NFL. They were terrible against Dallas, who's the best, top 5 offense. They only gave up 20 points to the Seahawks. Should have won that game. That was Jalen. And then down the stretch, they fell apart with the Giants and Cardinals. But I think there's this conflated notion that they were consistently bad. They had some high points, especially earlier in the season defensively.
We'll step aside and get to the break here on Birds 365 here on Draft Week. Turn it over to Jeff Kerr and John McMullen. Jeff Kerr doing a late night on CBS last night, another mock draft. I imagine Jeff has done 10 to 12 to 15 versions of the draft. So we'll get some of his thoughts here on Birds 365. Back in a moment.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
On
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer 3 major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News?
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
We're back. Finally here, Jeff Kerr. Finally here. Draft Week Monday at Jeff Kerr CBS. My buddy Jeff Kerr, the hardest working man in show business. You're on locally CBS Philadelphia last night. Here you are early this morning with Birds 365. So I'll start. Where are you, man? I had the weekend to analyze this thing, paralysis by over analysis with the NFL draft. We are mock draft. How many mock drafts have you done, Jeff? How many Eagles only mocks? Just one?
Yep, just one. I can't do any more. I get tired of prognosticating. I get tired of this. Just tell me where people are going when they're going.
Exactly. Now, unfortunately, it's part of our job to make these educated guesses. And, over the weekend, I started shifting towards Latu a little bit for this perspective. But by the way, I think it's all got to do with Dr. Arstenoda and whether he's medically cleared. If he's medically cleared, that's a big if. I'd love to be a fly on that wall of the Eagles. But I think back to Howie's pre-draft availability, Jeff, and he showed some rare frustration. He's got a ton of experience. And it was when he got asked about Hassan Reddick, and you could just see it boil over. It's like a pot boiling over. And it was basically like, hey, you morons, everything doesn't happen in a vacuum. And I start to think, and again, this is probably having too much time. And I start to think, boy, did he show his hand? Was that the rare showing of his hand? Like, I'm getting an edge rusher, and I'm getting the best edge rusher in the draft, because he knows if Latu is cleared by the Eagles medical staff. And if he is, this is a poor defensive draft, at least at the top, where it's going to be all offense early in the draft. He might be the best defensive player in this draft if there were no medical concerns. Am I taking my conspiracy theory too far, Jeff Kerr?
Your conspiracy theory is going with everything I've been hearing since the end of March. Don't be shocked if they take an edge rusher in the first round. And this is when they had Hassan Reddick on the roster. And now you got Roseman upset. First off, when Roseman flipped out about that, I said, you do know you didn't have to trade this guy, right? Because everybody got to look at next season and the season after next season. Well, how about this season? This season, you still had Hassan Reddick under contract. You could have paid him more, and you could have addressed something else on your roster if you chose to. But I don't blame them for this. When you got guys like Latu, Chop Robinson, Jared Verse just sitting there, and you may only have to trade up a couple spots for them. I think you take that. opportunity. I'd love to see Jared Verse in an Eagles uniform. I'd love to see Latu's the one I really want to see in this uniform. I think he could be a bona fide stud if he's healthy.
Yeah, and that's a big if, and we can't know that, but it just the rare instance, because Howie's been doing this for a long time, and he usually just bends off stuff pretty easily, and he got a little bit, I don't want to say upset, that's not the right word, but he was a little bit frustrated, and I think trying to make people understand it's not just about the moment, it's a big picture plan, and all of a sudden, if you get somebody like Latu or even Jared Verse, it comes into the focus comes into play, and all of a sudden people are like, "Oh, that's what you were thinking." I get the feeling that's what it's about, but overall, I don't think anybody's going to be there. Look, if the Eagles clear Latu, that means probably some other teams are going to clear him, and he's not going to be there at 22. Potentially. Verse, I don't think is going to be there at 22. Certainly Dallas Turner isn't. Then you start to ship towards corner. I don't think Terrion Arnold's going to be there at 22.
He won't be there.
Then you ship towards offensive line, and you want the guard tackle versatility. And I think J.C. Latham is the guy. He's not going to be there. And then you start to say, do they really want Cooper DeJean? Do they really want Nate Wiggins? I don't think so. Not at 22. So
what about Fuaga? Do you think they?
Well, Fuaga's in that conversation as well, but again, I don't think he's going to be there at 22. I think I focused on 3 players right now. That's where I'm boiling it down to. Terrion Arnold, the 2 Alabama kids, J.C. Latham, and Latu, and he's the wild card if he's medically cleared. I think those are the 3 players, and it's going to be 4 out of 5 years targeted trade up to go get them. If one of them starts to get in that range, I'm not saying they're going up to 10. If one of them starts to fall a little bit, I think Howie will quickly move to get a player. I don't think he wants to sit at 22 and take the leftovers. And that's, by the way, Jeff, that's where I think people misconstrue the draft. Like, everybody's got a different board. So when you look at your favorite big board, we're going to have Rick Saratella, hopefully an hour or two. Those guys, and they're all great at what they do, but they're looking at 32 teams and just rating the players in order. And all 32 of those teams have players they like, have players they don't like, have different coaches, different schemes, different wants, different needs, all that kind of stuff. Just because somebody says Nate Wiggins is a guy I focused on because, look, he's too small. And him and Vic Fangio's defense and run support, I don't like it. I don't like it. So I don't think the Eagles want to wait to 22.
And look, Nate Wiggins can play, but yeah, all your concerns, I agree. Now, it's funny, when I did my no trades mock draft, and I predicted I was going to do it, and it actually just happened he fell there. But Chop Robinson at 22, I'm like, you know what? If they have to pick at 22, and again, this is no trades, I feel that's a fair pick there because they like him. But when I was looking across the board, it was like Wiggins, Cooper DeJean. I'm like, I don't think they're in love with these players. And so that's why I keep saying to myself, they're going to trade up if one of these guys falls. And, Latu's one of the guys I feel they really love. You know what, John? I'm convinced, like, they're taking either an interior lineman or they're taking an edge rusher in this draft. I really don't think they're taking the cornerback round 1.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that, but I do, Adam Schefter sort of put out his intel and this morning on the Eagles, and predictably it included what I just talked about, the targeted trade up, because that's been their recent history.
And it's better than trading back.
Yeah, and they're a contender. They don't need volume. I think I mentioned that with Krause. I think people get caught up with volume. If you're a bad team, you want volume. If you're a good team, you want good players. I don't care about 10 picks. I don't need 10 picks to populate my roster. If you have a 3-win team, you probably want 10 picks. You probably want more than 10 picks. You want to populate the roster. That's not the case here in Philadelphia. But, Adam brought up, as everybody brought up, and this one drives me crazy, and I'm not blaming him, but they haven't drafted a cornerback. They don't draft cornerbacks. And back to Lito Shepherd. Well, they wanted to draft J.C. Horn. They wanted to draft Patrick Surtain. They wanted to draft Derek Stingley the next year. Even, everybody wanted to draft Sauce Gardner. That was pie in the sky, but they love Sauce Gardner. They would have drafted all those players.
Back in the day, they wanted to draft Darrelle Revis.
Yeah, I mean, there are 31 other teams in the mix. Believe me, they would like to have Dallas Turner. They're not going to have a shot at Dallas Turner. So you got to factor that into the equation. And back in the most famous example, which everybody now knows, they were going to take Christian McCaffrey with the 14th pick in 2017. They were crossing their fingers. Never got close to that.
And I think Marshawn Lattimore was their number 2, if I wasn't mistaken.
But the larger point, you're right, is they wanted a bunch of corners over the years, but the board hasn't fallen that way, and it hasn't. And you got to when the board doesn't fall your way, you got to go in a different direction. I mean, that's common sense. But when it comes to the trade up, anybody else? I brought up Terry Arnold, J.C. Latham, Latu, potentially. Anybody else in Jeff Kerr's mind that would be in that conversation for the targeted trade up?
I still think to get J.C. Latham, you got to jump the Saints. I really do. I feel like J.C. Latham is going to be a New Orleans Saint come Thursday night, or any one of those like elite tackles that are left, or interior linemen. So I'm looking towards that. Terry Arnold's a guy I definitely would trade up for. Latu. I'm just trying to remember my board and how it fell.
Any of the other corners? Right, because Quinyon Mitchell.
Quinyon Mitchell's one. I think he's going to be gone by 12. Honestly, I think he's going to be the first one taken.
Do you think any defensive player has a chance to go before Dallas Turner?
No. I had, when I did my, again, it's no trades mock, I did 3 cornerbacks, 3 receivers. I think I did Joe Alt, and then I think it was Dallas Turner at 8 with Atlanta.
How many quarterbacks you got going before 22? That helps the Eagles. If you get to 5 or even 6, because there are some crazy quarterback desperate teams. 4 are going.
4 are definitely going. I think Penix is going to be the 5th.
And you think he goes before the Eagles at 22?
Yeah. So that's what you got to root for, by the way. I think. You got to root for Penix.
That's great. That's great for the Eagles.
By the way, I was talking to Byron McFadden last week, the former cornerback, and he said to me, Penix is their best quarterback in this draft. I said, I'm not going to argue with you on that.
Favorite flavor, man. I was talking to a GM who said, I asked him who the second best quarterback was, because I'm a big Jaden Daniels guy.
I am too.
And if I'm Washington, I'm taking Jaden Daniels. There's a lot of JJ McCarthy hype today, by the way, Jeff.
You know what? I've never seen a player get hyped so much for doing so little.
It's a red flag to me, because as conservative as Jim Harbaugh is, I mean, if you have somebody that good, why do you put the reins on him? I don't understand that.
He had talent around him,
but I mean, I don't know. The most important player on the field, you're limiting him. That's a concern. For me.
By the way, this is where I'm going to back you up here. You had Roman Wilson playing wide receiver on that team, and you just did not throw the ball enough.
That's an interesting name for the Eagles starting in round 2, by the way. But before I get to round 2 with you, Roman Wilson, by the way, is who I'm talking about. That's an interesting potential round 2 option. But when it comes to the quarterbacks, I was talking to a GM and I asked him who the second best quarterback was. And he said, whoever lands in Minnesota. And his perspective was that's the best situation because you're going to have Kevin O'Connell, who people around this league love. I'm not quite sold on him, but he's been a solid young coach at the bare minimum. You have Jefferson, you have Addison, you have Hawkinson when he comes back. Now you have Aaron Jones in the backfield. You have good tackles. Kristen Darisaw is really good. Brian O'Neill's really good.
You got improving defense too with Brian Flores.
Yeah, well, that's all smoke and mirrors. But from the offensive perspective, it kind of the light bulb went off for me. It kind of like, yeah, he's probably right. Situation really matters for a quarterback. So if you like Michael Penix, I kind of respect teams who have the courage of their convictions and go, you know what? I don't care what everybody else says. If I like this kid, I like this kid for my system. And he might end up being better than the Drake Mays and the JJ McCarthys of the world.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So one thing with Penix, I always go back to, if it wasn't for his injury toward the end of the year last year, are we talking about him as back into the first round, early second? I don't think so. I think it's in every game I watched Michael Penix play last year, I said, wow, this guy is a top 10 pick. And for some reason, the draft nicks are telling me he's not. So what am I missing here? I guess I'm one of those watch the tape kind of people. And when I'm judging these quarterbacks, and I'd have to agree, I think it's Williams, Daniels, and then Penix. I like Drake May, but I don't like where Drake May is probably going to end up, and that's New England.
All right, Eagles second round, and if we're talking targeted trade up, depending how high they go, they might not have to give up one of those second round picks, but there's a potential they could. So
do you give them up, John?
I prefer not to. I prefer only to go up a couple spots, whether that's a future pick or something. Remember, they don't have a third round pick, so that complicates things as well in the immediate aspect of it. But as we've seen, Howie's very capable of dipping into future picks to try to move up in a small way. So he can do things a lot of different ways, but let's say there is only one player you're going to get in that 50 to 53 range, for argument's sake. Shep Kerr got a guy, he's pounding the table. If I put you in there with Howie, you're going to pound the table for anybody like Nick Sirianni and wake everybody up?
He won't fall at 50, but could Edgerrin Cooper be there at 50?
No. I agree with you. I think he would be the perfect fit for the Eagles at all-ball linebacker in this draft. But they're no man's land with Edgerrin. You can't take him at 22, and there's no way he's getting a 50.
No,
I think.
So yeah, he's in that. Yeah, is what you call it, the no man's land for them. There were again that could be the receiver pick. We mentioned Roman Wilson. What about Ricky Pearsall? I think Ricky Pearsall will be an excellent.
Yeah, he might fall. He might fall to that spot. I like Ricky Pearsall. Roman Wilson, yeah. So if you're looking at that, offensive line, if you don't get an offensive lineman, then I think the legit interior guys are in play.
And there's a lot of them, by the way.
Yeah, there is. I think you can get a Zach Zinter in the 4th round, and he might be your starting right guard. That's you don't want to mess with that, but
you can get him though.
Yeah, he broke his leg, so he's going to fall a little bit. They looked at Cooper Beebe. He should be right in that mix, 50-ish.
John, I wanted to ask you this because you're more in tune with all, the top 30 visits and stuff. Do you put a lot of stock into them?
I put a lot of stock in the themes of them. In other words,
where they're leaning?
Yeah, they're looking at a ton of offensive linemen. So they're gonna draft an offensive lineman in the first 2 days of the draft. They looked at a bunch of edge rushers. They had Latu and McKinstry in to look at medical people. Kool-Aid's another guy I should have mentioned. If you're forced to stay at 22, again, that's medical. He's got to get past the doctors first. And they looked at both of them. And then, you know, edge rusher, offensive line, a couple receivers. Who else did they bring in? That kid Hunt from Houston Christian, the edge rusher.
That was an intriguing one, by the way.
Yeah. You know, so they could be looking for that day 4 edge rusher if they don't get it early in the draft, and that could be he could be in the mix there. So you have all these contingency plans, but I think people get too excited for them, to answer your question. And I always say, I would always say to Jody, meetings can go one of 2 ways. They could be good or they could be bad. And when you bring somebody in with a top 30 visit, you can eliminate them as well. And I think the natural inclination is to say, oh, the Eagles brought this guy in. The Eagles are interested in him. And that's not always the case. Darius Geis being the best example of this, when he got in a fight with somebody, Stu Staley denies it was him. Howie Roseman denies it was him, but he was yelling at somebody. And the Eagles took him off their board. Right. Never lasted in the NFL. Probably a good decision.
I had a college player about 2 years ago who ended up being a first-round pick, told me it's basically a job interview. It's what it is. They just want to meet you. They want to meet your demeanor. They don't really work you out much. It's just, oh, here's our facilities. How would you react to this situation? How would you react to this situation? You know, what's your work ethic like? It's literally like like you and me going for, say a job at ESPN.
Well, yeah. Well, and then, like I said, with Latu and McKinstry particularly, they looked at them late. It was probably more medical than anything else, but you got eyes on you the minute you hit the building. So they're kind of looking at how you treat other people and, do you have a good personality? Or you're the kind of guy who's going to, BG it and be this energy monster and be positive to everybody. That helps. You're on. So from the minute you hit
I had a player tell me, and this was another player. He was a second-round pick. He said he felt he got drafted just because he said to the custodian, "How you doing?" Just because he says hi to everybody. It's
there
weird.
You go.
Yeah.
How you treat the little people. Everything factors into it. But your top 30 thing, the Eagles usually draft a couple people that are on their top 30 list. So is it the be all end all? No. But if things go well, and Latu's one of those guys I've started to focus on late in the process, because I probably put too much into circling back to Howie's press conference. I probably put too much into it, but it was so out of character for Howie. It was almost like, wait, something else is coming. And something else is coming. Could be a trade down the road, could be something else, but something else is coming.
So I was at the ballpark that day when Howie was doing his little spiel, and I'm listening to it. And I believe it was Dave Uram that asked the question that got him.
Yeah, and he was very unfair to Dave. I mentioned that on the show. He's very, very unfair to Dave.
And I saw Dave that day, and Dave goes, "Did you happen to hear Howie today?" I said, "Oh, I heard him because I think he just gave me his hand of 15 in blackjack." I'm like,
yeah, Dave. I criticized Howie pretty harshly on this show. He was very unfair to Dave, but
it was a fair question too.
Yeah, it was a fair question. It was. I think Howie got frustrated. As I said, it was born out of frustration. I should have handled it better. I think if somebody else asked the question that he's more used to, he would have handled it better. And I think that's completely unprofessional.
Which is weird because Dave's there a lot.
Yeah, but not, Howie doesn't talk a lot. So, Nick gets to see us a lot more. Howie only speaks very rarely. And he speaks to a more condensed group usually. And he gets comfortable with something. I think it's unfair. I said it was unfair, but it is what it is. And I think, later Ruben asked a question he doesn't like, and he handled it better because it was Ruben. That's my point. And he's known Ruben for 100 years.
And Ruben sat in the same seat for 100 years.
Yeah. So that's what that was about. But anyway, that's inside baseball. Getting back to the draft, I will say day 3 running back. The Eagles, I think it's been, Saquon Barkley's here. So everybody forgot about running back. Well, all they have is Kenny Gainwell behind Saquon Barkley, who's in the final year of his rookie deal upcoming. And then they have Ty Davis-Price, who they signed to a futures deal. People are probably saying, who? It's a 3rd-round pick of the 49ers.
I actually like that signing, by the way.
Well, it was very Trey Sermon-esque. Same team, same rounds. So I don't know if it's going to work out, but he's got some talent. And they have Lou Nichols, who's on a futures deal. That's it.
If there's one hasn't signed yet.
If there's one guarantee I'm going to make to you, Jeff, the Eagles are taking a running back on day 3.
And please let it be Blake Corum.
Blake Corum.
I take him behind Saquon.
Does he get to day 3? He
might
be a 3rd-round pick.
That's
he
what
might be a 3rd-round pick.
I was talking to a couple people about that. They're like, where do you think he goes? I'm like, is he a day 3 pick? They're like, well, with this class, he probably is going to be day 2. And yeah, he might be a no man's land for him too. But if he falls, that's a guy you trade up for. Just because I'm not saying he's going to be a starting running back in the NFL, but you put him behind Saquon Barkley, you are going to be tough to stop in short yard situations at all times.
The Eagles seem obsessed with finding these guys that can catch the football, and I get it because it's the modern game, Jeff.
Well, Blake can do that. Not great, but he can.
Well, that's what I mean. So because I look at Estime too from Notre Dame, and I'm like, boy, I'd like to have that dynamic, to have the pass catcher sort of movement space guy. And then the big back. I've always wanted to see a big back who could move the chains behind this offensive line. Probably the last one they had was LeGarrette Blount the Super Bowl season. And that was the end of his career.
By the way, teams are so scared. I'm glad you brought up Estime. Teams are so scared because of that 40 time. I don't get it. I don't get it. It's like I've heard so many people say this. Oh, that they. He should be the best running back taken over the kid from Texas. I'm like, then why isn't he? Oh, because of his combine, his 40 time. Like, they actually put stock into that?
Oh, they do, especially a running back. But to me, because of the type of back he is, I'm not looking for him to break up a 50-yard run. I just want him to move the chains as a backup. I'd love that fit. I don't think the Eagles even think about it, though. I don't. Because they'll look at him and say, well, he can't catch the ball. If you get him in space, he's not going to help you. I kind of want to piecemeal it and say, go about it this way and see what Landon. They all talk about, they just paid Landon Dickerson $84 million. You got that left side. Jordan Mailata, $66 million. Let him fire off the ball with somebody who can go north-south immediately. I would love to see that.
I would
and
too.
Guess what? You're not going to see that with Saquon.
No, he's not a north-south guy. Never was.
No.
I used to criticize him when he was at Penn State because he run east-west too much. In fact, some people have told him basically what I told them about the way he runs. So you want me to run straight? That was the response. So, this is what it is. You take the good with the bad when it comes to Saquon.
Yeah. And I'm by the way, people get mad at me because I bring up questions on Saquon. Saquon is a great dude. You know that, Jeff.
He's the man.
The one thing you will never hear me say, everybody who talks about Saquon Barkley loves him. He's a leader. He's a great teammate. But I think all of that, manifests into excuses, to be bluntly honest, to be quite honest. And I don't know if he's a fit for this team, but he better be, because the expectations for this offense is off the charts.
I've been defending Saquon for 6 years, and I'm saying just get him off that Giants roster and beyond that. So I'm gonna get it this year. I'll say he better show up.
Well, by the way, I think he's going to be very good. I think he's going to be very good, but I'm using the Eagles standard of special. Howie Roseman coined that, and they think he's the closest thing to Christian McCaffrey. I don't know.
I don't know about that one. Christian McCaffrey's he's a different type of breed. I'll say that.
I agree, and I think people expecting that type of presence are going to be sorely disappointed. But we'll see. Hopefully, I'm wrong, and hopefully, it shakes out a different way. I'm never wrong about Jeff Kerr. My buddy Jeff Kerr at Jeff Kerr CBS, finally here, the draft week.
Thank God.
Yeah, thank God. I'm with you. So I'll leave it here. And I don't even want to say trade up, because I'm with you. Trade ups and mock drafts are stupid. So I'm just going to give me the player. Who are the Eagles taking? I don't care if they trade up, trade down, or stay put. Who's going to land in Philadelphia?
Should I be vague and tell you the position, or should I just say it?
You could do both.
They
say
will.
If it's position, whatever you feel most comfortable.
They will draft an edge rusher, and I believe it is going to be Latu.
Oh, nice. All right.
And if they do that, I am going to text a bunch of people and say you could do cartwheels now.
Yeah, I think you bet now. If the neck fusion doesn't hold in 18 months, we're all going to.
Well, what's funny, though, because the guy played 25 straight games after all this?
Yeah, well, that's another thing. Even a couple of years ago, the medical advancements, it probably was a death sentence, certainly 10 years ago, as far as his football career. But there's been such advancements and things like that. But anytime you talk about the neck, I don't blame teams for being concerned. I really don't. And that's why he's falling, and that's why it's all on the medical staff. But if he's cleared, yeah.
I'm all prepared for when they draft him or when they draft an edge rusher. What does that tell you about Nolan Smith? Who cares?
Yeah. It's my Chester Taylor story.
When Chester Taylor's 1,000-yard back and they drafted Peterson.
Yeah. Because I was confounded. And I said, why are you drafting? At the time, Minnesota had a ton of needs. And I'm like, you already got a pretty good running back.
Cornerback was one of those needs, by the way.
Yeah. I asked one of the personnel guys, and I said, you got a good running back. What you got a ton of other needs. Why this big? And he just, the great quote, F Chester Taylor,
Oh man.
This guy's different. He was saying, he was not criticizing. Chester was a very good player.
When Adrian got drafted in 2007, and again, this is when I was starting to kind of rank my best player. That's one thing I love to do. Rank the best players in the draft. I'm like, Adrian Peterson's number one, right? And looked like I was right. 17 years later?
Yeah. Well, he should have been, but yeah. So, and by the way, that's one of the reasons covering Adrian Peterson early in his career is one of the reasons I don't want to hear excuses for Saquon. If you're that good, you find a way. This guy won the MVP facing more 8-man boxes than I've ever seen in my life. The quarterback was Christian Ponder. Daniel Jones makes Christian Ponder makes Daniel Jones look like Joe Montana.
One of the easiest evaluations I ever did, breaking down a game. I was in my junior year of college, and we were breaking down the NFL playoffs. And the Vikings were playing the Eagles that week. And I said, the Eagles got this. And everybody goes, man, you're so confident. I'm like, do you see who the Vikings quarterback is? Do you really think Tavares should? Well, what about Adrian Peterson? I'm like, Okay, you stop, put an 8-man front, you stop Adrian Peterson. Done. And it did work.
Yeah. It didn't always work though. That
Yeah,
was the
he
thing
did have a
about
40-yard run in that game, though. I
Yeah.
will say that.
Yeah, you normally put an 8-man box, you can stop anybody, but there are a few guys. Adrian was one of them. Earl Campbell, way back in the day, was one of them.
And Earl Campbell.
Walter Payton, obviously. The great, Emmett Smith, Barry Sanders.
Eric Dickerson probably faced
Eric Dickerson. Those guys. Jason Kelsey talked about it, Jeff, there were 2 players he played with, he said, that would have been successful regardless of coaching scheme, philosophy, anything. Jason Peters, Fletcher Cox. I personally think he should put Lane in that category and AJ as well, but maybe with AJ hasn't played with him long enough. Lane, I think he forgot, but very few players can perform successfully no matter the situation. Guys like Adrian were like that, and that's where Saquon's not like that, and I think they're trying to claim that he is.
I still say they overdrafted Saquon when they did. I thought Saquon was
well, that's without question, but that's part of the valuation of the position, the modern era, all that kind of stuff. But that's not his fault.
No.
That's not his fault. The Giants definitely overdrafted him, and then you waste all your time trying to build around a running back. They wasted over half a decade.
They're still wasting time. If they draft JJ McCarthy, I'm just going to laugh. I really am. They don't need him. They need other things. They don't need JJ McCarthy.
But all right, well, you keep. I apologize. I'm keeping you over.
You can keep me as long as you want, John. I'll work till the afternoon.
I'm going to go the quarterbacks. I'm going to go obviously Caleb Williams, and then the draft starts with Washington's decision. I still think they're going to Jaden Daniels. You think New England's taking a quarterback, or they're going to trade down?
I think they should take a quarterback. I just don't like any quarterback they're going to take. So maybe they are the team that trades.
I think they're going to take advantage of Minnesota, who badly wants Drake May. Josh McCown used to coach him in high school. I think the Vikings.
By the way, that's another guy you forgot to mention why Minnesota is a great situation. Look where Josh McCown's at. Yeah,
Josh as well. I should have mentioned Josh, who's, when he was here for the short period, phenomenal guy. I think he's a future. I said it when he was here as a player. And the Eagles, by the way, wanted to hire him immediately as a coach, to their credit. But he knew he still was going to get paid as a backup quarterback. And that's more than being a assistant quarterbacks coach. The Eagles wanted, in fact, I wrote a column. I got killed, Jeff. I'm going to tell you this.
You always get killed, but what'd you get killed for this time?
I said the Eagles should make him the offensive coordinator.
I remember that.
Yeah. I said, who has more experience, understands more offensive systems than Josh McCown, who's played in like 17 different cities. He's seen every offense, every scheme. The Eagles would tell me, and more NFL teams will tell me, he's a future head coach. Why all the bullshit? Why? You got to start a quality control. You got to start at quarterbacks. You got to
tell that to Sean McVay.
Yeah. Why all the bullshit? I said, do it. Show the courage of your convictions. And they didn't do it. And he ended up going to Houston. And they made him the quarterbacks coach right off the bat. And you remember they interviewed him twice to be the head coach. And he's going to be a head coach. And if Drake May hits, if what I say is going to happen, but even if Minnesota gets McCarthy, whatever, and that quarterback hits, he's going to be a head coach in 2 years.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe even quicker than that. I mean, look how quick Kevin O'Connell became a head coach.
Yeah. So people think it's crazy, but for some reason, and I compare this with the NBA and Derek Fisher, who played 18 years as a point guard.
Pretty
and
good
then,
too.
yeah, pretty good player. And then they hired him to be, who hired him? The Knicks, I think, hired him to be a head coach right away. And people were killing. He's got no experience.
Near to Jason Kidd.
He's got no experience. I'm like, 18 years of playing the game is no experience. What other injury? That's not experience.
I always say this, and maybe it's because I played some point guard. I know my frame, but I was a good shooter. But when I was playing some point guard, I'm telling you, John, you see so much more on that basketball court than you even wanted.
I know, and that's the thing about Josh McCown, and he played so long in so many different systems, and the Eagles had him. Boy, I think they should have seized the moment, but things go quickly.
I think Washington should have seized the moment too with Sean McVay, and who else did they have on that staff? They had,
that staff was phenomenal. Yeah.
Who is the latest of that group now that's a coach? I'm drawing the blank.
It might be O'Connell. Has anybody since O'Connell been?
I think someone since O'Connell's been drafted. But by the way, don't you think it's funny how? And I gotta give a hat tip to Peter Schrager here. This is why I love Peter Schrager. Peter Schrager gets all his information from Sean McVay because he was the guy smart enough to talk to Sean McVay when he's some 26-year-old tight end coach.
By the way, he's still Mike McDaniel, I guess, was it.
Mike McDaniels, I think, is the latest one, actually.
So it was Mike Shanahan's staff, obviously. Kyle was on it. Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, Mike McDaniel, Bobby
Slowick. That's
Raheem Morris was on it. Kevin was on it. Yeah, that was a hell of a staff.
Oh, by the way,
that's like Andy Reid 1999 staff.
Yeah, the only difference is the Andy Reid 99 staff actually got good, and that team did not because Daniel Snyder was running them.
Yeah, and to a certain degree, Aubrey Pleasant was on that staff. Gee,
he was on that staff too.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive.
But one of my favorite stories about the '99 Eagles was when I was talking to Bieniemy at the Super Bowl, and we're just reminiscing about that year. He goes, he said it's so much different when you're a player or a coach. You're a player, you're thinking, man, these guys they don't know this, they don't know that, and you end up coaching with them. He said it all comes full circle, it really does. And I'm like, yeah, I said, as a matter of fact, and he actually remembered this play. I said, you had a 73-yard kickoff return in McNabb's first start. He said, I should have scored.
Yeah, some of those, and that, by the way, that coaching churn, and you've seen it here over the years, whether it was Andy, Doug, and now with Nick, that's harder to deal with than people understand because, I mean, you get good coaches, and that's the nature of the industry. Then you're successful and you lose them, and then you're trying to make the copy. And I always make that comparison. The Xerox copy is never as sharp as the original, Jeff. Never, ever, ever, ever.
Boy, that's a bad knock on Xerox there, John.
All right. Well, they're not sponsoring the show yet, so I can still use that. If they do, I will stop using the comparison. But you're right. At Jeff Kerr CBS is always right. Make sure you follow Jeff on X, Twitter. He's buying into my Latu conspiracy theory. We'll see. I'm sure I'll be here Friday, and everybody will be ripping me after they take Nate Wiggins.
I wouldn't be shocked on that one either.
Yeah, because I've crossed him off my board. But we'll see how it shakes out. That's the fun of the NFL draft. It's always fun talking to Jeff Kerr, my buddy. More Birds 365 after the break.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today, and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services, the first one being basement waterproofing, the second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs, and then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
For the big story on Action News,
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Back here on Burns 365, hour number 2 with John McMullen. Thanks to Jeff Kerr for jumping in hour number 1. Coming up shortly, Rick Saratella will be along to talk NFL draft with Johnny Mack with the 22nd pick in the 2024 NFL draft. The Philadelphia Eagles select Cooper DeJean.
I'm not a fan of it. A lot of people like Cooper. He's coming off a broken leg, and I think the Eagles did have him in. So I should have also mentioned him with the medical group, trying to get that clearance from the doctors. And, I'm sure he'll be fine from that perspective. That's not, again, the neck injuries, things like that are more concern long-term. So I think he'll be in the mix, and I think he would be a plan B or C contingency for the Eagles, but I do think it would be a contingency. I don't think he's one of the group that Howie's going into draft night saying, I got to have this kid. But again, there's 31 other teams you're dealing with, and sometimes the board doesn't fall the way you had hoped, and you have to have those contingencies. And to be honest, the Eagles have been one of the better teams at that type of situation. So you always have to be ready. Sometimes it takes two to tango. Sometimes you can't trade up. Sometimes you can't trade down. Sometimes you're forced to take somebody. That happened with Marcus Smith back in the day. It didn't work out very well for the Eagles, but you have to pull the trigger. And I think if they're in a situation where they have to pull the trigger, 22, he's one of the names that's going to be in the conversation, because I think the Terrion Arnolds, the J.C. Lathams, Latu, if he gets cleared, they're not going to be in the mix for the Eagles at 22. So then you have to make the best of the next group of players. And he would be in a group with say Amarius Mims from Georgia, the offensive tackle, Tyler Guyton, a lot of talk about him, offensive tackle from Oklahoma. The problem there with those two players is they don't really have that guard versatility, at least on the surface. So, you know, do you really want to redshirt them for 2 years waiting for Lane Johnson? The Eagles would do it, but I don't know if that's the way they want to go. So they would be in the mix, and some other cornerbacks. Nate Wiggins would be probably in the mix at 22. And if I were in that situation, I'd rather try to trade out and trade down and take a legitimate interior offensive lineman. Like I've said, Graham Barton. I don't want to take him at 22, but if you can go way down to like 30, 31, I'd take him there. And that's a week 1 starter. Week 1, right guard. And I think everybody would be happy, but well, not everybody, because people like skill position players, but you get my point. After seeing him play, I think everybody would be happy. But the Eagles don't think that way. So that it's not going to happen. But that's just my personal belief. And then Brian Thomas Jr. at wide receiver, a little out of the box. If he falls to 22, you talked about third receiver a little bit, Krause. There's your third receiver. And that also gives you a little bit of insurance because A.J. Brown's going to get real expensive in the upcoming years moving forward.
I'm concerned on the defense, John, because of when Hassan Reddick left. So I'm not speaking from a position of being an expert. I think it's a glaring loss to the defense. So if the draft is used to fix a definite need for this team to compete, it's to select somebody that's a day 1 starter or that can play on defense. That makes sense or no?
Well, you always want people to contribute right away.
I don't think they should have gotten rid of Hassan Reddick, but that's what I think doesn't matter. I'm just saying because of that.
I would say about 90% Eagles fans are in your camp there. And that's why Howie got frustrated a little bit when he was talking at his pre-draft availability, because he's like, essentially he's like, just wait. Something else is coming. I don't know what that is, but we'll see how it shakes out. From the perspective of day 1 starter at 22, you'd like to find it. I think Justin Jefferson won at 22, so it's not like it's impossible. But it's much less likely to get a day 1 starter at 22 than say top 10, obviously. So that the lower you get, I don't think you can say, and that's my concern with the corners, especially in this defense, Vic Fangio's defense, which is so complicated. And the communication, they put so much on the players to communicate properly. And that's why I'd rather have veterans out there than young players. And you kind of saw it last year with Eli Ricks and Kaylee Ringo learning on the job. It ain't easy. And then you raise the expectations because people will say 22nd pick, corner's got to start day 1. There are going to be a lot of hiccups there. And there's going to be a lot of pressure put on that kid. And that's one of the reasons I'd go in a different direction. And even Terry and Arnold, if you trade up, and that's one of the guys I think the Eagles will look to for the target to trade up, he's going to have some problems. Everybody's going to have problems learning this defense because it's that complicated. You see veterans blow coverages in that defense. So just be aware of that. Put a little dog ear on that.
last thing, Johnny Mac, and then we'll take just a short break because I want to get Rick Saratella right into the conversation with you here on Birds 365. Zan, when we do go to break, let's go to the Del Val spot and then maybe come right back instead of running a full break, just so we can get Rick Saratella in here with conversation with John. I look at, or I try and evaluate, or at least put my opinion on Howie Roseman's draft performance from the post Chip Kelly era.
It's probably a good way to look at it. Howie Roseman 2.0, I like to call it.
Yeah, from the time that he resurfaced and put his exclamation point in year one after Chip with Wentz and all of the picks that have followed in the early rounds, for the most part, have been good. They've been contributors. They've been players that have played on this roster or are still playing. Now you can say, hey, Andre Dillard went at 22 and he's no longer on the roster.
Well, nobody. I mean, you could do that about every team. So, if you want to go back to 2016, which is, essentially the Carson Wentz year, which, hindsight says the Eagles won a damn Super Bowl. Carson had a big part of that. To my knowledge, they've still only won Super Bowl. So even though it ended badly, I still consider that a success. Derek Barnett did not work out, but it's hard for me to say that he was a bust. He stayed around for a very long time. You'd prefer more production. The 2018 draft was phenomenal. And they didn't even have a first-round pick. That was the Goddard, Maddox, Sweat, Jordan Mailata draft. That's as good as it gets. 2019, they made a mistake trading up for Andre Dillard, but they got Miles Sanders in round 2. They made a big mistake with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. But they were going to draft Paris Campbell, who hasn't worked out as well. Now he's on the Eagles, so you'll get to see that. 2020 was the disaster. That was Jalen Reagor. And Justin Jefferson went right after him. But the Eagles got Jalen Hurts in that year.
Jalen Hurts.
Yeah. And then 21 is tremendous. Devontae Smith, Landon Dickerson, Milton Williams, 1, 2, 3. That's as good as it gets. Jordan Davis, I think, is underrated. Cam Jurgens, we'll see. Nakobe Dean, we'll see. And then last year, I think Jalen Carter is going to be a star. Overall, that's pretty good. And we'll talk to Rick about that. That's pretty good. Everybody has hits and misses. Overall, that's pretty good record, I would say.
Well, I only get one opportunity here on Birds 365 on draft week to put out my selection, and I have done that, John. Cooper DeJean.
If you got to stay at 22, that's not the worst pick, but I think the Eagles are going to try to.
Let's take a short break. We'll tell you about Del Val Insurance, where you can save up to 40% on your car insurance. Call Jim or Fran, the managing partners. 22 different options. They work with 22. They work with 22 different insurance companies to get you the best value, and more importantly than value and cost, the right coverage. Save up to 40% on your car insurance. On the other side of the quick break, Rick Saratella will join John McMullen for our final draft coverage here on day one of draft week here on Monday. Back in a moment.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
Quick bounce back for Rick Saratella, my buddy. I'm fired up. It's draft week, and I try to get Rick Saratella at Rick Saratella on X, Twitter, one of the best in the business. Been doing it a very long time, NFL draft Bible for years, and now he's an advanced scout himself for the 14-time Grey Cup champion Edmonton Elks. Used to be the Eskimos. They'll always be the Eskimos to me, but 14-time champions. We're talking about one championship here in Philadelphia. We're just still trying to find number 2, Rick. I kind of went down. By the way, is that an Alliance of American Football hat?
It's not. It's an all access football.
Oh, all right.
It's almost like a copyright infringement.
Yeah,
that you bring it up.
I love it because I always love Rick Saratella's swag.
Right?
Yeah, I thought Charlie Ebersol gave you one of the. No, he wasn't the AA. Yes, he was the AA. Charlie.
Yeah, I don't think they have the money to sue me right now.
No, I do not. Charlie, he was running up some bills, but that's another discussion for another time. I just, you probably heard in the green room, I was just running down Howie's record, sort of Howie 2.0, I like to say, since he came back from exile. It's a pretty good record, Rick, overall. I think people get caught up in misses. Everybody misses in this, right? Is there anybody? People say Jalen Reagor. Everybody's got misses. But overall, I think that record's pretty solid. Your thoughts from doing this as long as you have?
Yeah, to me, it's kind of been like a batting average. If you can bat 300, I think you're doing very good when it comes to draft picks. If you can get 4 out of 10 or 5 out of 10, now you're
that's Hall of Fame level, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you look, on average, every team gets 7 draft picks. I mean, you get hopefully 1 contributor out of the first 3 picks. I mean, if you look at the first round bust rate is like almost 40%. So you're hoping you get one guy that pans out on the first 2 days and one guy that pans out on the back end and maybe a guy that surprises. But really, traditionally, you get, maybe 2 or 3 guys max from each draft class that are going to contribute. Now, if you remember when the Giants had that magical run, Ahmad Bradshaw in the 7th round, and they had a remarkable draft that year. Every single player, I think Diassi was the rookie that year. Every single player they drafted contributed to that Super Bowl team. So you do get a fluke class like that every now and then. But you look at what Howie Roseman has done. He's surrounded himself with some good front office people like Dave Caldwell, former GM, is there hanging out, and some guys that he's had there in the past. Some guys he has not been able to retain, and I think they're going to hurt a little bit more like we saw last year with the coaching continuity there. I think Sirianni's a little bit on the hot seat, but we can get into whatever topic you want over here.
Yeah, he is on the hot seat. I love people that pretend he isn't on the hot seat. I mean, come on. Everybody around the league sees it, and you're trying to sell that he's not a lame duck coach. If he doesn't have success this year, Rick, he's gone. Is there any other way to look at it? And the expectations are huge.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you had time. It was a lengthy article about Bill Belichick on ESPN.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a tremendous job by them.
Yeah, I thought it was very telling, though. Like, the Eagles kicked the tires on Billy Belichick, and I think they wanted to do their due diligence there. And I think, maybe, you're seeing that Jonathan Gannon and Shane Steichen had a lot
don't say that.
With the success of the Eagles than people realize.
Yeah. Jonathan Gannon, still enemy number 1 here in Philadelphia for far too many people. That's amazing. I mean, that guy put together one heck of a defense, and the Eagles fell off a cliff. So maybe people should look in the mirror and say, hey, maybe it's not that bad after all. But yeah, let's get into the draft and the fact that, number 1, I'd like to ask everybody, and Mark Dominic was on conference call last week, got to talk to him, and he put the number of legitimate first-round picks, legitimate. I know our buddy Jody Mack hates when I say this because there's 32 first-round picks, but there's never really 32 first-round picks from a talent standpoint. Mark put the number 23, and that was higher than I've gotten from most people. I want Rick Saratella's number where there's a little bit of a drop-off from maybe first to second round.
Well, I'm going to be on the opposite end of the spectrum here. Typically when people ask me this question, I think of players who, no matter what year, would be first round automatic draft picks, right? So to me, there's maybe 8 to 10. I'm not as high on the quarterbacks as everybody else. I think there's one franchise signal caller. His name is Caleb Williams. So the other 4 or 5 wouldn't be in that mix for me. I think that there's no blue chips at running back. Wide receiver, there's 3. Tight end, there's 1. Offensive line, there's really 2 for me. And then on defense, there's really like 3 or 4 guys that would be a first round pick in any given year. So put me at about a dozen.
Ooh, I like harsh graders. I like hard graders.
That's just real. That's
yeah.
real talk.
Well, yeah. And you got to be an optimistic realist. That's what N'Kobe Dean said last week. So,
yeah.
I'm with you on the fact that blue chippers are, and by the way, defensively, Rick, this is not a good draft for blue chippers defensively.
It's unbelievable. Like, you try to find a home inside the top 10 for a defensive guy to come off the board.
Yeah.
8, I guess, is where Atlanta's standing out there. Is there a defensive guy worthy enough in the draft where someone's going to really trade up and go get somebody? I think the problem is, like, you've got 3 edge rushers that are really evenly matched. I think Dallas Turner is more of a stand-up 34 guy. I think Jared Verse is a more Philadelphia 4-3 hand in the dirt kind of guy that would fit well. And then you have Latu, who's probably better than both of them, but at one point was medically retired with a neck injury, which is scary stuff. And he couldn't get cleared over there at Washington. So, we don't have access to that medical. And I think that, you're going to see possibly the top 10 picks all be offense.
Well, that's where I wanted to go, Latu, because that's where I'm kind of leaning for the Eagles from the perspective of because I think they're going to do what they always do, and that's that identify 3-4 players and make that targeted trade up when the last one is there, if somebody falls a little bit. In the case of Latu, I'm with you. Nobody knows. I wish I was a fly on the wall of Arston Oda's offense if he's going to get cleared. If he gets cleared, I think that's an Eagles pick. I think that's the guy. Now, if they clear him, somebody else might clear him. And I think he's the best defensive player in the draft if he's healthy. Would you agree with that?
I think he's in the mix. You're not the only one to share that sentiment. I know my good friend Brian Baldinger says the same thing. I'll tell you what bothers me a little bit about Latu was down in the Senior Bowl. I don't know. I thought he struggled against some of the bigger guys. I know he's fast and agile and it has some bend, but I saw him get pushed around a little bit. And that was a little bit troublesome for me. I think Jared Verse is the best edge rusher personally. I think it's very close. I think Verse is a candidate too for the Eagles to be there on the board. And I do agree that Howie Roseman traditionally likes to build from the inside out. So I think one of these edge rushers, the Eagles too, I think they're in a good spot that they don't necessarily have to go and give up draft equity because of the way this board falls. Like, to me, I think 12 to 15, how many people are really worth outside of the quarterbacks? How many players are really worth trading up for? That's how you define blue chip players. So when you get to that 12 to 32 range, those boards are wishy-washy no matter who you ask. So there's going to probably be a guy like on the board in the top 15 for the Eagles that's kind of hanging out when they roll around. What are they at?
22 to start. Well, that's kind of my thought process on contender versus non-contender, volume versus I don't care about volume. To me, if you're a contender, you shouldn't be worried about volume. You should be trying to find a player that can be a difference maker for you. Whereas if you're a 3-win team, I want a bunch of picks. I want to be the analytics guy. I want 13 picks and populate the roster. I think the Eagles obviously are more in the former category. They need to find a difference maker. So for corner, for instance, I've focused on Terrion Arnold as a guy who would be probably the best fit for a Vic Fangio scheme, in my opinion. There's some other good corners, and it seems to be a favorite flavor type thing, whether it's Cooper, DeJean, Nate Wiggins. I don't know how high you are on Rackestraw. Who am I missing? Kool-Aid McKinstry, but there's some medical concerns with him. Are they all that even, or does somebody stand out to you?
Oh, I mean, I think Quinyon Mitchell in terms of
Quinyon I missed, yeah.
yeah, I think in terms of just the size, athleticism, physicality, I don't think there's any question he's the top cornerback in this year's draft. I think it's really a clear cut to me. I think Quinyon Mitchell will be the first corner. Terrion Arnold, I think, will be number 2. Mitchell can really get in your face and play that press man physical coverage. Arnold, I think, has the flexibility there to play man or zone. And I have Cooper DeJean number 3 on my board. And I heard Krause say that could be an Eagles selection. You talk about being able to pick up the defensive scheme and learn that, like Cooper DeJean at Iowa, very well coached. And I'll give you a first round dark horse. Maybe he's hanging out for the Eagles in round 2. He might sneak into round 1, but Rutgers has always been a product of well-coached cornerbacks under Greg Schiano. Max Melton is a guy.
Yeah,
lot of people are
I like
projecting him as
yeah.
a slot, but he's played like 90% of his snaps have come on the boundary. So, like you talk about, we've talked about Avonte Maddox always being the durability concerns. Like Melton's a guy with that inside outside flexibility, also very smart, can pick up the playbook. And I'll tell you what, man, I mean, his numbers are also right there with all these guys. So,
well, now that you're with the Eskimos and doing stuff, and it's sort of an interesting, job, to be honest, personnel, because you different teams have different philosophies and different schemes, and they're looking for different traits and different types of players. And the good teams are the ones that are able to mesh the personnel with the coaching and all that kind of stuff. So I bring up Vic Fangio, and that's probably why I've sort of skipped over Quinyon Mitchell. Not that I think he's a great player, but as you mentioned, to me, he's a press corner. All right, what is that going to do for me? Jalen Ramsey's one of the best press corners, maybe the best press corner of the generation. Vic didn't use him like that. And he's pissed off to the point he didn't use them like that because he wants to play press coverage. Plays cover 6, quarters, cover 8, everything but press. So to me, he's not a fit for the Eagles. So if I said we're going to be zone heavy, we're going to be zone 75% of the time, which go find me the best of the bunch in that philosophy, who was it for you at that point?
Well, I think Arnold might be a better fit, but I still think Mitchell's the better talent and might be able to adapt and adjust. That's what the great game of football is all about. I just think that, this guy, I don't know. I saw some reminiscence of the kid with the Jets there coming out of Cincinnati.
Sauce Gardner. Yeah,
I did, man. I saw that down at the Senior Bowl. I saw flashes of that. So to me, I think when you start drafting for need over talent, that's where you kind of screw yourself and can misplay the board. I think Mitchell can do it. I think he's a rare talent and a guy that I would try to make it work, or again, maybe just adapt and adjust or tweak some things. Now, Cooper DeJean, he might be better than both of those guys in terms of fit because he can line up. See, like people question his hips. I don't question his hips at all. I think he has very adequate, above average hips. He can play the slot. He can play safety if you need. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson wasn't always the most durable guy. They've had some issues there at safety. So like Cooper DeJean is that chess piece for you. So, I mean, you could state a case for all 3 of those guys, right? And you could also say like, hey, there's going to be, you mentioned Rakestraw, like Melton. I saw somebody say Melton's too small. Well, he's the same size, if not bigger than Terrion Arnold and Rakestraw. So are you saying those guys can't play on the boundary either? Check it out. Kamari Lassiter, Max Melton's a bigger guy. So, I don't think people realize that. And I think Sainer still, if you want a slot guy on day 2, that guy's pretty good. TJ Tampa, Iowa State, didn't run the best 40, so maybe he's hanging out on day 2. Like cornerback, there's some depth there, right? Where you can wait till day 2. I think if you want like a edge rusher,
you better act early. Yeah.
You've got to pull the trigger early.
Yeah.
Those edge rusher, quarterbacks and getting after the quarterback, those guys are going to get moved out. And I will say, like, I don't think the Eagles, I like Troy Fontenot out of Washington. I don't think the Eagles will do that. I think they're okay right now in offensive line, but like offensive tackles, you could see just like 6 to 8 alone.
Oh, they're
going
loaded.
round.
Well, that's why I've been, and I'm still hyper focused on the offensive line. Bottom line is that's what the Eagles do. They draft offensive linemen, but if they're going that direction, Rick, they'd like to have somebody who could start at right guard day 1 and then kick out for Lane Johnson whenever Lane decides to retire.
That's Fontenot all day.
And that's Fontenot, but I don't think he's going to be there. So I think number 2 is Latham. Agree or disagree? And how high would you have to go to get a J.C. Latham?
I think I actually don't have Latham as high. I think he's strictly a right tackle. So
that's good. That's what they want. Can he play right guard? Can he play right guard?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I suppose he could. Yeah, he could. He's 6'6", 340, so he could be that guard and then kick out, once Lane hangs up the I think it's going to be alt 1. And again,
by the way, how clean is Joe Alt? My God, that guy. I'm going out. I mean, he's the safest pick in the draft. I always pick the safest pick in the draft. He's my safest pick in the draft.
I'll tell you, again, you want my comparison he's got the Joe Thomas comparison. Like he's going to be.
Ooh, that's pretty good.
Yeah. You hate to compare him to a gold jacket, but this guy's going to be hanging out for a decade in the league, blindside protector. Fashanu from Penn State, it was unfortunate he tweaked his hammy at the combine. I was at his pro day. He wasn't able to do any testing. He did go through positional, so that, maybe he slides a little bit, but people like Fuega from Oregon State, he's an emotional guy, man. He gets penalized a lot. False starts,
that'll go over well. And
funny little funny business after the whistle, Fuega, you gotta watch, man. You gotta harness in some of those emotions. Fashanu's a cleaner player, in my opinion. And then I think it's, probably Latham, Fontenot are kind of bunched in there. Marius Mims is the prototypical mold, right? If you talk about size, athleticism, but lacks experience, a little bit raw, had that blood spinning procedure done. Only 8 games started. And then the guy that I'll give you one guy I'm lower on and one guy I'm higher on, like Tyler Guyton of Oklahoma. I'm putting him a 2nd round grade, and I feel that's a little generous. I just don't think this guy, I don't think he's a starter in the National Football League. I think he's a little bit awkward with the footwork and the body balance and doesn't get low enough for me. And then Jordan Morgan out of Arizona, like this guy gets downgraded because it's 32 7/8 inches, 32 7/8 inches, right? That 1/8 of an inch would put him at 33. Jordan Morgan from Arizona is probably going to outplay half of the offensive tackles.
Yeah, he's a good player. Yeah, Jordan Morgan. I think he might be a 1st rounder as well. No question. I go back to Tyler Steen with the Eagles last year, and people projected him. He played left tackle at Vandy, right tackle at Vandy. Then he played left tackle at Alabama, and everybody projected him inside because he's got smaller arms. And then the Eagles get him, and they're like, "Oh, he's more comfortable at tackle." And they're now it's like he might start a right guard. He's going to compete, but if they can't get anybody else, but I think they're finding out pretty quickly, he's a pretty good tackle, and maybe he's not that great of a guard. But that arm length, I don't know. Sometimes I think they get too hyper focused on that, Rick.
I agree. I'll give you another one. Dominic Puny out of Kansas, right? 33 and 3/8-inch arms. But this guy, I mean, he was a stonewall at Mobile against the best of the best. A lot of people projecting him as a guard. Dominic Puny out of Kansas. I think he's a starting tackle. Christian Jones out of Texas. He's an interesting guy, 4-year starter, very solid size, length. And then, day 2, mid rounds, there's like Walter Rouse out of Oklahoma, started, feels like, for 5 years between Stanford and Oklahoma. Roger Rosengarten out of Washington.
Yeah, the Eagles brought him in for top 30.
So I'm down on the field at Senior Bowl, and I see this this quick moving tackle, Rosengarten. Talk about a right tackle,
Where do you think he's going? I think he's day 2, though.
Yeah, I think he's probably in that early round 3 mix, because he's a little bit raw, he's a little bit wild, he's like a wild horse. He's a little out of control at sometimes, but he's good, he's athletic, he can get to the second level. So I think he's a guy that probably takes a half a season to a season to get caught up to the NFL speed of things, but he's going to be all right. But again, like, if you want to plug and play tackle, you've really got to, I think, pounce in round 1, because coming back in round 2, these guys are just going to be gone.
Yeah. Day 3, I think here in Philadelphia, a lot of people have forgotten about running back because Saquon Barkley's here, and rightfully so as a starter. But the Eagles have no depth. Kenny Gainwell's coming on his last year of his rookie deal. They got a couple futures guys. Ty Davis-Price, who was a 3rd-round pick a couple years ago. Lou Nichols led the nation in rushing, but these are not big-time prospects, obviously.
Yeah.
I need a day 3 running back starting in the 5th round. I need Rick Saratella to uncover a gem. I don't want to say Isaiah Pacheco, but that's what I want. I want Isaiah Pacheco with a 5th round pick, and he was a 7th round pick. So that should be easy for you, right, Rick?
Well, I did have a 2nd round pick on Pacheco.
Nice.
I give it.
Should have been a 2nd round pick.
I do a little Brooklyn brawler for you and give myself a pat on the back on that one. But how about Blake Watson out of Memphis? Little combine snub. This guy's been on my radar all season long. So Brandon Thomas, the starting running back, goes down in training camp, tears his ACL. In comes Blake Watson, a transfer from Old Dominion. He arrives after spring ball, so really wasn't on the NFL scouting radar. I don't know if it was your show. We talked about how does a guy like this not get invited to the combine, but he was the MVP of the Hula Bowl. I thought he deserved to be the MVP of the Shrine Bowl. Does a little bit of everything well, run, block, catch. Now, at his pro day, I mean, he tore it up. I have it here. 4.4 40, 41.5-inch vert, 11'3" broad. Blake Watson out of Memphis, he'll be hanging out there.
Sounds like explosion, those numbers. Yeah. A lot of explosion, and that's always a good thing. Yeah, the Eagles, I guarantee the Eagles draft a running back on day 3. I barely make guarantees, but I guarantee they're going to get.
It's a good draft class for some bargain bin shopping. So
yeah. How deep do you think this draft is? A lot of people have criticized it and said, if you got a lot of 6th, 7th round picks, you're better off getting some future picks.
Yeah, my response to that is always, every year there seems to be starters found on day 3 of the draft, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round. So if you do your homework and you do your due diligence and you stay true to your board and you're prepared and you cover your grounds, I think, every draft you can find starters in every round. This year's draft, I've heard a lot of mixed things about the older age. I mean, I'll tell you what, look at these quarterbacks alone, 24, 25, 26.
Oh, Knicks, man.
Oh, my God.
Sam Hartman, I think, is older than me, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if Sam's getting drafted, but
probably not. He's on the fringe there. But, I think with the NIL, a lot of these guys, I know when I did the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, we lost a lot. Like day 3 guys were our specialty niche there for that all-star game. We lost so many guys last year to NIL deals. They go back to school, they go collect $50,000, $150,000, and go hang out in college for another year. I think it's the new normal, so get used to it. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing because you're getting guys now that are just more ready. But like to your point, the Eagles are a team, they're built to win now. So whether it's Latu, who has a medical injury, or an older player who might not be there for a second go around or a second contract, I think the Eagles are a team that one of the few teams that can afford to roll the dice, right, and get a little risque. Like this kid, Tavondre Sweat, like talk about falling off a cliff because he got a DUI, DWI.
Yeah.
Oh man, this guy,
timing, man. Bad timing.
Yeah, but you know what? I'll tell you what. This guy is a mountain mover. He's a first-round talent for me. Somebody's going to get an incredible steal. I don't think he makes it out of the top 100 still, but everybody stopped talking about that guy. Whew.
Yeah, everybody's scared nowadays. Anything happens. It's the world we live in. But you're right. Some GMs will look at that as tremendous value and try to make that decision and live with the consequences. At Rick Saratella, make sure you follow Rick on X, Twitter. He does a tremendous job. NFL Draft Bible for many years, the creator of that, one of the best draft guys in the business. All Access Football. I love the hats. Edmonton Elks, too. Advanced scout for the Edmonton Elks.
Hey, April 30th is the CFL draft. Don't forget
April
about
30th, the CFL. So we'll put a asterisk on that as well. So I'm going to put you on the spot here and say, I don't mean, because I know my perception, we know Howie Roseman, and the one thing he said it last week in his draft availability, Rick, he said, I like the trades. He's going to trade up. He might trade back. He's probably not going to pick a 22. Just give me a player. Give me a player for Philadelphia. First round of this draft.
I'm going to go Jared Verse, man. The
nice.
Albany Dane transfer to Florida State.
Jody loves that. Albany.
High motor guy, man, has dealt with adversity on and off the field. Just really can get after it. And I think if you're looking for a guy to maybe offset some of that Hassan Reddick production versus your guy, one of those older guys that you can plug and play. And I think somebody who could be a double-digit annual kind of sack master in the National Football League.
Yeah, I probably put too much stock into his pre-draft press conference because he got really rare for Howie. He got a little bit frustrated with a question over Hassan Reddick, and it was basically saying, wait, something else is coming. And it might be Jared Verse. I focused on Latu, but hey, if either one of us is right, Howie will probably say, I told you, maybe. He used the word vacuum. It doesn't happen in a vacuum, Rick. All these moves lead to other moves. But always good to see you, buddy. Tremendous job with the NFL draft. Love Rick Saratella. And I'll probably try to get you back after the draft. I know you're very busy, but
yeah. We got to do it before May 7th. I got to leave
before May. I'll get you on before May. It's
CFL training camp. Yeah,
CFL training camp. All right.
Ed. Hey,
I got that marked down. Appreciate it, bud.
Yeah, we'll chat soon. Thank you.
More. We'll put a bow on the show. I'll say it to Jody again since we're talking about Albany. More Birds 365 after the break.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, we got this. Call 215-458-2222.
field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Wrapping it up on a Monday, draft week here on Birds 365. Thanks to Rick Saratella for jumping in here with Johnny Mack in hour number 2. You know, Johnny Mack, I guess, you enjoy what you do for a living. I'm sure Howie Roseman enjoys what he does for a living. And there are probably different times during the course of the year when you get bigger enjoyment out of what you do professionally. I've got to believe that this week, leading into the draft, is one of those weeks in Howie Roseman's year that he thoroughly enjoys.
He loves it. That's why, when he got exiled to the other side of the building when Chip Kelly was here, even though he got a raise and a better title, he was not happy, because what he likes most is the personnel aspect of it. And you saw Howie joking around. He's back to being his normal self at the pre-draft stuff. And he said, I like the trades. And he was smiling. He does like it. He does like all the back and forth and the ability. And he's very good at it. Let's be honest. And part of that is, the security he has that other GMs don't. So Jeffrey Lurie deserves a lot of credit for that as well, because other teams aren't as patient and willing to live with the back. Just as I talked to with Rick Saratella there, all these people that bring up one pick, you can go to every team in this league and point to bad draft picks. As Rick said, be it batting average is 300, you're doing a good job. Everybody misses picks because it's not an exact science. You're dealing with human beings. You're dealing with young kids. So a lot of things that can go wrong, both on and off the field. And Howie's done a better job than most. If you look at his history from post Chip Kelly on, it's been very good compared to other GMs in the league.
Well, when you're on the doorstep, when you're a good football team and you're on the doorstep, despite the drop off from last season, my only other concern going into it is a statement that you made in the very beginning of this show regarding the head coach, Nick Sirianni, being sort of a lame duck head coach, or potentially, if the team does not perform and exceed or reach that expectation that was already determined when they decided to bring him back.
Yeah, I look, I don't agree with it. I told you, I don't think the Eagles handled that. the right way. I just talked about patience and ability to have a little bit more security from a GM perspective. With coaching, it hasn't been exactly the same with Jeffrey Lurie. And hey, the bottom line is there's so much pressure on you to win in the NFL. And when things don't go according to plan, there's so much talk and chatter. It's easy to say, don't be reactionary, but it's not easy to do. I mean, again, we're talking about one Super Bowl championship. And I remember, and I tell the story all the time, I remember finally getting done that night in Minneapolis and sitting back, and I said, well, Doug Peterson's got a lifetime dispensation card in Philadelphia. It's 3 years, Krause. 3 years. 3 years. That's how quickly it turned. So things move very quickly in the NFL. And Nick Sirianni's on the clock now. He is on the clock. And as Bum Phillips, the former great coach in Houston, once said, there's two kinds of coaches, them that's hired and them that's fired. That's it.
On that note, we'll close out this edition of Birds 365 with John McMullen. Johnny will be right back here tomorrow with more draft talk, draft conversation. Perhaps the mock draft will change overnight. I'm sure it will. Perhaps there'll be news, or there certainly will be speculation as we lead up to the draft getting started on Thursday. Thanks, everybody, for contributing and being part of our chat today. It's always great to see all the activity in there, good, bad, or indifferent, so we appreciate that as well. Don't forget, 2 o'clock today, the National Football Show with Dan Cilio. I'm sure he'll have an opinion or two on this draft week. Johnny Mac, great stuff, man. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Krause.
All right, good stuff. See you next time, everybody.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.